Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar series, The Future of Employee Engagement. Now, this is an exciting one because it's a three-part series, and today is part one. And it's the first time we've ever done this series online. So this content we crafted at the beginning of the year, and we've taken it to various different cities, talking about the future of employee engagement. And we decided that to cap off the year, it would be great to put all of that content into a webinar series to share it across the world. So whether you were able to join us in person and you want to see it again, take some extra notes, or whether you weren't able to join us in person and you want to see the content for the first time online. So we've been doing the employee engagement masterclass across the world since I've joined Unily, which is 5 years now. And so it's something that comes back every year. And this is the first time we've ever done it online. So it's quite an exciting time for us. And part one, so today I'm going to be taking you through the first section of the future of employee engagement, which is comms and impact. So formulating this whole concept, comms and impact was the first section we wanted to come to. It's an area I know particularly well with internal communicators and makes up a big part of employee engagement. So today I'm going to tell you the role that internal comms plays in the broader employee engagement part of the organization, and also how you can make sure that the internal comms you're delivering is having an impact, and that impact is seen by the enterprise. So just a little introduction from myself. My name's Kaz. I work for Unily. I look after our market insights, thought leadership. So I craft a lot of the content that you see in our webinars, in our blogs, in our research and our guides. And you can see a lot of that on the Unily website. And of course, I get to present some of that content here today. So just very quickly about Unily. So Unily is an intranet or an employee experience platform. And we help to deliver organizational velocity for the world's most iconic brands. And you see some of those brands down there below, from Shell to Mars to McDonald's, Estee Lauder companies, CVS, and you can actually find some of these case studies online on our website. So if you want to hear the story of how Unily is powering organizational velocity for those enterprise organizations, you can see some of those stories on our website. And what's particularly exciting is that we are the only provider in our space that is a leader in all the analyst reports in our area. I've worked in intranets pretty much my whole career, and now is the first time that we have the three big players, the analysts, weighing in on our industry and making sure that we're delivering value for enterprises, and they rank them to see how they do in certain things like vision and use cases. And so if you want to deep dive on how we deliver on some of that, you can look at any of those three reports, whether it's Gartner, Forrester, or IDC, again, at unily.com. So let's get started. I want to give a little bit of context as to why we decided to do this masterclass and this particular topic. So the big stat, and you would have heard this widely reported in different areas, comes from Gallup. In Gallup, they measure employee engagement. Whenever you hear about employee engagement going down or up, it's usually from the standard measurement that Gallup do. And it finds that despite all that extra effort on employee engagement and employee experience, more investment, you see it making headline news and in frontline newspaper, in newspapers, for example, so much more effort in the area and more investment. But still, despite all of that, 8 in 10 employees are not engaged in the workplace. And that's pretty sad. And actually, it's untapped potential in terms of how we improve the organization and how we deliver organizational velocity, how we make our organizations deliver better and faster. And ultimately, that hits the bottom line. Now, Gallup calculate the cost of this around 9% of global GDP. So that's a crazy number. But when you think about that from your organization, if you could add 10% to your organization's bottom line, now that's a really great opportunity for you to progress the organization. So the opportunity is massive. And I think internal communication plays a massive role in that. But so some of that is quite abstract, right? 8 in 10 employees, 8.8 trillion. How do we meaningfully impact those numbers? And so I looked through some of the research, and there are 3 specific things that I pulled out that I think we can meaningfully impact. The first one is around employee stress. And so Gallup found that this year, 44% of employees experienced significant stress at work. Now, that's a record high, meaning employees are stressed as ever. And this is something that we can help through better communication, through better experience, through better flow of work. And you'll hear throughout this webinar series how we can impact employee stress. The second is a classic, of course, connection to mission, vision, and values. Now, likewise, stress is at record high. Connection to mission, vision, and values is at record low. So take those two stats and you're kind of burning the candles from both ends. And this is quite sad because in an era of purpose-driven work and somewhere where we feel like employees are trying to pick workplaces based on value alignment, this should be increasing. And this is somewhere where specifically communications can have a massive impact. And the third stat that I wanted to call out here is around attrition and retention. And there was a stat here around 51% of employees planning to actively seek new employment in the next 6 months. Now, this is particularly worrying because we want to create compelling workplaces that power our organizations, that help them go faster, that help our customers better. You cannot do that with a revolving door of employees where employees are coming in and out. You don't create high performance workplaces like that. So take these three things together, and I see 3 opportunities that we can change the levers on and really meaningfully impact our workplaces and improve employee engagement. So coming back to the main topic here on the future of employee engagement, across this webinar series, you will hear how the future of employee engagement is coming together. But to give a bit of context, where have we come from? Well, employee experience generally is one of those areas that historically has been quite underfunded. When you look at teams like internal communications, even HR, digital experience teams, internally they haven't got the investment that some of their external facing teams have. And when they were created, often in silos just to make things happen, to hit the minimum level. Now we find ourselves in a slightly better position for global enterprises where we are understanding the value of the employee and the value that they have to the workplace. We've also seen the rise of certain job titles, for example, the movement of HR into people experience. You see roles in IT focused around employee digital experience. And of course, looking at general employee experience as a term, the kind of wave that's created and the use of that term has increased. So it shows that we are moving in the right direction. But where do I see us going? Well, I see us going to somewhere where we have employee experience support squads, the same way that we have customer experience teams that are shaping themselves around delivering the best customer experience. Employee experience support squads will do similar things, come together cross-functionally with different teams that can impact employee experience and fine-tune those experiences to make sure they remove some of the things that are causing friction, that are making employees unhappy, contributing to stress, these sorts of things. And so that's where I see us heading. And of course, a big part of that is in internal communications. So let's start here. And I want to understand, what do you think the purpose of internal comms in an enterprise is? So hopefully you'll see a little poll up on your screen, and I'm keen to know, of these options, what do you think is the kind of primary purpose? So you'll be able to select one of the options. Is it leadership visibility? Is it strategy awareness for you? Customer experience, improving the customer experience? Is it creating alignment with the company values and delivering on that? Or is it sharing knowledge? So, of course, I'm sure you all agree some of these contribute to the function, but what do you think is the primary answer here? Okay, I've seen some of the poll results come in. I'll give you 30 seconds or so. Okay, so we're seeing a mix of answers here. So I'm seeing so far about 36% of respondents, and the highest here is saying knowledge sharing. That's pretty cool. And actually, it goes to show that internal communicators are understanding that knowledge is communication. That's great. I'm really excited to see that. Next up, we've got value alignment. This is kind of the classic pure version of internal communications, understanding mission, vision, values, how we drive alignment in our employee base. Or actually, we've seen strategy awareness come up, but that does link. And still some answers in there for customer experience and leadership visibility. customer experience coming up bottom, like your lucky customers. Just kidding. But what I take away from that is that there isn't one clear answer. We aren't aligned on, ironically, around what the purpose of internal communications is. And the good news is that you're not the only ones. So Gallagher, who do the State of the Sector report, you may have seen it, but they do, for me, the kind of primary internal comms measurement across the globe. And they poll internal communicators across the world, asking them on things like, what is the purpose of internal comms? How do you use it in your organization? What are your budgets? So do download that if you want to get deeper into that. But the headline stat, and there's always one that comes out of this report that makes, it's always a little bit controversial. And this was the one from this year. It found that 74% of internal communicators say their primary measure of success is employee engagement. That's the number one metric. So it's the most commonly reported measure of success for internal communicators. Now, that's a little bit troubling because by definition, internal comms is not employee engagement. There are so many things that impact your employee engagement. It's part of the puzzle, yes, but if that's the number one metric that is being deciding your success, there's some misalignment here. And actually, I'm not the only person that thinks that. If you look at, after that data was released, there was some really interesting discourse. So I went to LinkedIn. I'm a bit of a LinkedIn guy. Looked around to see what are people saying about this. Do people agree, disagree? What are some of the experts saying? And I follow someone called Jenny Field. She writes some pretty great internal comms books. So she's got a newly released one out there. So do look at that. And I was particularly interested in her take because she says, looking at this data, it's terrifying. 74% are accountable for employee engagement and 50% are operating strategically. Internal comms and employee engagement are not the same thing. IC professionals are not HR professionals. This feels like we are going backwards, whilst made to feel like we are going forwards by talking about AI and tech. Now, that's a really interesting take because it goes to show that people that know internal comms inside out are deciding the function, are delivering on internal communications, see this as a problem area. So where does that leave us today? I have a slightly rosier view on that, and that is that I understand why internal communicators are reporting on employee engagement. Because if you look at the growth of internal comms, in my head, there has been certain eras, and everyone will have a slightly different experience depending on what organization you're in, what country you're in, the type of organization you're in. But roughly speaking, I've noticed these eras. For a lot of organizations, internal comms started as disseminating business updates, sometimes being perceived as an executive mouthpiece, helping leaders bring out those messages, often a one-man band or one-woman band often, to where we are now. And as we've come through the pandemic, what we've seen is we've flexed to so many different things. Things like supporting with employee listening, with polling, the employee engagement scores, supporting with the culture of the organization, strategy alignment, all of these different things we've plugged into. And so what's really interesting here is that when you put all of these things together, by definition, if people are looking for someone to own employee engagement, whether that's your leaders or whether that's your employees, they're probably looking at you thinking internal comms have stretched to this. They know our employees. They're the ones that should be reporting on employee engagement or should be a measure of their success. So there is a lack of clarity there perhaps, but there might be an opportunity. And where I see us going next is that internal comms have a more trusted strategic advisor role as part of a broader employee experience team. And so what I would recommend is that be aligned on those objectives, whether you want to report on engagement or not, that's up to you. But it does have a clear role in the future of our organizations. And if you are an internal communicator, here's the first thing that I would say to you is that you have a choice. And that choice is this. I'm seeing a fork in the road in our organizations. Internal communicators have a choice between picking their lane of understanding what pure internal communications is, the value that it delivers to organizations. And I would say don't report on employee engagement, push back on some of those metrics because you risk undervaluing the function of pure internal communication and the value that gives to the organization. That's option one. Option two is own it. That is, I think over the years, we've stretched to so many different things. We've been a bit like a Swiss Army knife, supporting the organization when it comes to some of the needs around employees. We do things that quite often are not internal communication. And some people have leaned into that. And if that's you, then I think that's great. I think there's an opportunity for organizations to have point employee experience teams. And the people at the helm of that, I think internal communicators are more than qualified to own that in our organizations. So if you feel that's you, then that for me is an option that you can take. But I would say pick a lane. So to kind of help you, you don't have to pick a lane today, but I would say I wanted to kind of give you some inspiration around what lane should I pick and how is internal comms being operated in some different organizations. And you'll see some similarities, no doubt, to how you operate here in your organization, and also some things that are different. So what I've tried to do is pick 3 different case studies from high-performance comms teams that work with Unily. I looked across all of our customer base, and these are the 3 I really wanted to pick to show you, because they have 3 different stories that I can articulate to you. National Grid, based in the UK and the US, have about 32,000 employees, and for them, they are ones that are more in the purest internal comms lane. They understand the value of internal communication, and they put a lot of effort into getting that right and show the value of that. The second example is from Kerzner. Now, Kerzner lean into employee experience. They understand that actually when they lean into employee experience, they can get some of the outcomes that they want for their organization. And you'll see what that is for Kerzner. And they're a luxury hospitality company based in Dubai. And the third example is a bit of a wild card that I've picked. It's neither the purest internal comms nor employee experience, but they do really lean into measurement on employee engagement. And I'll tell you the value of that. So 3 different examples here, and I'm going to run through them now. So the first example is National Grid. And what's really interesting about National Grid is that they are fixated on supporting their vision, their mission, vision, values. And their vision is to be at the heart of a clean, fair, and affordable energy future. So how does the internal comms support this? Well, firstly, they do extensive work to embed the values in the organization. Now, I'm sure some of you have indulged in this and put a lot of effort into putting it up on the walls and internal marketing materials and posters and things like that. But actually, they really want to ensure that this is done properly. So what they do is they ensure that they don't just articulate the values and put them around, but they understand the levels of the values. What does this look like in a certain role? How do I deliver on this? What are the behaviors and the underlying behaviors that happen in a field worker role, for example? So the granularity here, it's levels deep, and they entrench that in different ways, digitally and in analog ways too, using signage. But I've picked some examples here, which I thought was pretty cool. They kind of gamify some of this, and they do like kind of micro-learning education pieces and quizzes as well to kind of get some engagement, test people's knowledge, and really embed those values. So it's not just a checkbox exercise of telling people what our values is, it's actually understanding that this is what our values looks like and feels like day to day in the organization. But they also go further than that. It's like, how do we make sure, so we understand that we've got people to understand it and embed it deep. How do we codify it into our culture? Well, a big part of that is recognition and showing people in the organization what that looks like. And so then taking these stories, they have a embedded reward and recognition culture where people can recognize people living and breathing those values day to day. But even more than that, their leaders are able to look at those nominations for people delivering on those values, and they will pick and spotlight those best in class, which is so cool. So you see some of the examples here. And what's great is they find people locally in different roles, and they spotlight those at local signage and in local communications teams as well. So it's not just a top-down value communications, it's actually utilizing the local network so local people can see and feel what the values look like in their area and how they're being delivered by people in their area and in their role. And so this is how you really deliver on it. And those that do best, they actually capture that communication in kind of what I think of like Humans of New York type knowledge articles that capture like how they got there, why they did those behaviors. And so what that means is values isn't a point in time communication. It's sort of refresh at the beginning of the year. They actually have these mini case studies that capture some of their employees and how they deliver on those values throughout the year. So you've got a constant cadence of values day to day in the organization. So that's purest internal comms at National Grid: mission, vision, values, living and breathing it. So next we go on to Kerzner. So Kerzner are a luxury hospitality company. You'll know them probably most commonly from Atlantis the Palm in Dubai, but they've got many other cool brands as well. I was lucky enough to go there, so I got to see with my own eyes how their internal comms team were operating. And they were supercharged on delivering for their vision, which is to enrich the lives of people all over the world by creating amazing experiences and everlasting memories. Now, notice the difference there with National Grid. And the internal comms team thought, okay, if our vision is this, how do we as internal communicators support that? So this is where you'll see more of them leaning into the employee experience side of things. So I've got a video here to show you. We went out there to do this marketing video with them, but actually when you're watching this video, think of it from the view of what are the internal comms team doing day to day and how is it supporting that vision? Because some of it won't be traditional internal comms, but they are helping to deliver on that vision. So I will be quiet for a bit and let you watch this video for a couple of minutes.
At Kerzner, we're a leading hotel management company who take care of 4 very iconic brands. That includes Atlantis, One and Only, Cyro, and Rare Finds.
We are truly a global company. We have just short of 15,000 colleagues worldwide. Before we came upon Unily, we didn't have the ability to push messaging out to everybody within the company. And that makes it very difficult to align all the colleagues with the company because they don't have that deep understanding.
70% of our colleagues don't actually have email addresses. There are lifeguards, there are chefs in the kitchen, there are lobby hosts. So they're not necessarily sitting behind a computer or a laptop every day. We need to be able to connect with a disconnected workforce.
We did a full market search. The key differentiators for Unily was that it's truly mobile enabled, giving our colleagues the ability to access it worldwide, to give them that real feeling of being part of a much bigger organisation. That sense of community is really, really important when you're in one of those more remote locations. To call it iConnect was very much about being that central hub where people go for information and also to complete their daily work activities.
Colleagues can have access to information, tools, and resources literally in their pocket. And it gives that flexibility to consume information in their own time, in their own space.
They get to share photos, they get to share videos, they get to like and interact with posts and tag each other in posts as well. I often find that colleagues tell me that it's with all their other social media apps that they just go to it when they're on their break or on their off days, which just shows how important the app is in terms of connecting colleagues with the organisation.
It's acting as an aggregator. It's deep integration into our SAP SuccessFactors, so they can see their pay slips, they can see their time off, they can request time off, they can book their vacations, request their employee rate discounts, all these different things. It's all in a single platform. The ability to integrate all these different systems heavily into Office 365 makes life so much easier.
The system is very, very easy to use. The fact that it's directly connected to our HR system, all the brand's key colors and color palettes and the language that we use were all set up in the system, so we don't have to do anything. So it's really easy to direct information to the right person that way and make that connection between the colleague and the business individual to them.
What I love about iConnect is I can get rich insights in terms of analytics. We get to understand what information people are consuming, what stories they like to read, and how they like to read it, so that we're providing news that is newsworthy. And that's something that has definitely been a differentiator for us. It creates brand pride and it motivates colleagues to go and deliver that extra service.
Our learning and development on iConnect has access to all of our different programs. The more we publish, the more we see people's interest being piqued. With iConnect, colleagues are engaged, know more about the business, the product, the features, the benefits, and the facilities that we have, so that we are giving the best of our abilities to our guests and ultimately achieving the business goals.
This generation wants their voice to be heard, and iConnect gives them the platform that they can actually voice their opinions and share their feedback on things. It's a culture of recognition, it's a culture of celebration, it's a culture of transparency where you can give your opinions freely, engage with our leadership team directly, where you can suggest new ideas. It clearly drives an engaged workforce.
So in that video, they talk about how they are fixated on delivering customer experience. And so the internal comms team provide some examples of the things that they are doing within their Unily platform, but also outside of the Unily platform. So one of those things is what you see here, which is kind of like a knowledge portal, an FAQ portal. And so really what they show is how they capture knowledge. So actually think of it through this way. When I was staying in the hotel, if I'm staying in a room and I have a question, I can pick up the phone in my room and I can ask someone in a call center on site that will tell me the answers on certain things. And now, likewise, if I then go out into the hotel and I ask a security guard or someone a question, they would have to go to the concierge. The concierge would then pick up the phone to call the call center. The call center would give them the answer. For example, the aquarium opens at 9, and then that concierge would tell the security guard would tell the customer. Cool. So that's a flow that has a break in it from a customer experience perspective, because you've got multiple points of communications, opportunity for miscommunication, and also a loss of time. So the internal comms team worked out that this was a internal communication issues. And so what they decided to do was digitalize the FAQs, the knowledge that the call center have, and provide it via mobile for access for all employees. Meaning, if I'm just a concierge and or I'm working in the restaurant and somebody asks me a question that's outside of my remit, I can have the same access to that knowledge that the call center have and support the customer. That was one of the big things that comes out in the video, is capturing of tidbits and things that are going on in the organization in a central place so that all employees can access them. And a lot of you earlier said that knowledge sharing is one of the key purposes of internal communication, and this is it in practice. What's cool here as well is that you're able to tag knowledge by different areas. So when they created a new hotel in Atlantis, rather than having to have different sections for different areas or different sites or different platforms, that they could actually just surface the relevant FAQs by that specific hotel. So the next thing that comes out in the video is how internal comms support employee retention. One of the stats earlier was from about the revolving door of employees. And what they really noticed was how internal comms had come together with the talent and the HR team to reduce that. What's really interesting here is that hospitality is the highest turnover industry in the whole world. And so what's really important there, thinking back to their vision of creating best-in-class guest experiences, you don't do that through a revolving door of employees. You need people that are passionate about what they do, they know and understand the brand, and they deliver on that through the customers. So how do you compete when you've got employees that are constantly churning? And so really what they understand was that actually the sorts of people that work for a brand like Kerzner, they're interested in travel. And so actually, let's keep them in the brand. We understand that there's like some employee wanderlust. People like to travel, maybe go to different hotels, different brands, different experiences. And so let's keep those people in the brand. And so what they do is they provide a whole portal here that helps people understand the opportunity across every single brand in Kerzner or every resort, but also how can employees grow in their role. So whether you start off as a hotel manager and want to get into HQ, or whether you start as a cleaner or a concierge, what are the paths that you can grow within Kerzner and grow into new types of roles and continue to develop? reducing the chance of churn in the employee base. And what's pretty cool about this is the output, which is you get a higher than average employee stay rate, especially for the industry. But also what you get is these employees that have hopped across different brands, tried different types of roles in different countries and different resorts. And so these people are well qualified. They know the Kerzner brand inside out, how to live it and breathe it, and make great shouts for management roles and supporting the brand overall and helping it grow. And actually, Kerzner for 2 years in a row now have won Gallup's Exceptional Workplace Award. So it goes to show that there is like proof in the pudding that actually when you invest in the employees and understand the opportunities, whether that's through knowledge and helping internal communication or whether that's through retention, really that creates an engaged employee. So that's a great example here. So my third and final example is from Pearson, who are a global education provider. If you've ever taken an exam, you've probably taken one by Pearson or one of their brands. And what's really interesting about Pearson is that their internal comms team are measured on employee engagement. So they say, okay, so if our measure of success in employee engagement, how do we give ourselves the best chance of improving that employee engagement score? And it starts by looking at what meaningfully impacts the employee engagement score, what measures go into it, and how can we change those? So the first part that they noticed was that they needed to own the overall engagement narrative, meaning that if rather than talking about this kind of mystical employee engagement, and a lot of people use that term, but what does it really mean? What does it mean for Pearson? And so this communication here was about creating a campaign that helped the organization, that helped our managers understand what engagement really means. Why do we talk about it? Why do we want it? Because if we're going to be measured on it, we want to be transparent about what that is and why we want it. The second example is looking at the actual engagement score. 70% of your employee engagement score is attributable to the manager. So if you want to genuinely improve your employee engagement score, the best path to do that is through the manager and the team experience and supporting the manager on delivering a better team experience. So they created a manager's corner or manager's academy. On this, you can basically see one of the cool things is like helping those managers understand how they deliver on that, how they get better engagement scores, but also you can see communications from best-in-class managers that had the highest employee engagement scores. They would take short videos, small blogs that would help other managers understand what the things they are doing day to day that help them get a good engagement score. So you're kind of like sharing the love from managers and creating an overall higher standard of manager communications and manager experience that overall improves their employee engagement score. But also, and what you can't see on the screen is that below this is a whole timeline that helps the manager understand throughout the whole year, how do we get the best engagement score and what can we be doing? Because the engagement score doesn't start 1 month. The engagement score doesn't start 1 month before you release that survey. It's not a piece of comms that tells people it's live. Actually, things should be happening throughout the year and the manager should be doing stuff throughout the year to help them get the outcome by the time it gets to the engagement score time. So that is another great example. So for those of you that are just looking to impact engagement, improve your employee engagement score, think about what that means for your organization, how you can really look at the things that impact employee engagement and what you can do year round to support that. So 3 different examples there. Hopefully they've kind of inspired you. I saw Anna from National Grid is on as well. So glad that I could share your story with Marul and Recognition. That was it's honestly the best scheme I've seen used it. And I think you're growing it this year even more. So that's exciting. But looking at those 3 different examples, here are my key takeaways. The first thing is the common thread between all of those is that they rally behind the vision. It's not just about finding a best practice and copying and pasting something from some of those organizations. What it's about is understanding your organization, what that vision is, and how you as an individual and as a team can do everything within your remit to support that vision and help the organization. And earlier, I think I mentioned that internal communicators are a bit like a Swiss Army knife because we flex to so many different capabilities and functions and we're seen by so many different functions as delivering a wide variety of stuff. But remember that the Swiss Army knife is not about being everything to everyone. It's about being fit for purpose. And your purpose is support the vision of your organizations. So there might be a diverse set of things that supports that, but it's not about being everything to everyone. The second key takeaway across those case studies is that they talk the language of the business. It's understanding, okay, if we want internal communication to have an impact, we can't just speak in company isms and terminology that we communicators understand, but understand what lens are our leaders seeing the business through, what language are they talking, what language are they speaking at the board level, and how can we plug into that language to help them understand the value of internal communication. And also likewise for the employees. And the third takeaway would be stake your claim. So earlier I showed a bit of a fork in the path showing like purist internal comms or the opportunity to lean into employee experience. So there are kind of two choices there. Have a think about which one do you feel naturally inclined to. I've delivered this session across different cities in the world, and there are different experiences with that. I've spoken to people that have said, actually, this has made me realize that my role says I'm internal comms and engagement. I'm going to fight for engagement to be dropped from that so I can purely focus on internal comms and the value that gives. Likewise, I've seen people that have seen employee experience and be like, actually, do you know what? I'm doing a lot more than internal comms. And I think it's time that I was recognized for that, both in title. And so have a think about those types of two arguments and have a think about which side you fit in and whether there's an opportunity for you to kind of grow or clarify your role. So we have come up to 35 minutes. We've got about 10 minutes left for Q&A. There is a little Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen, so you can ask questions. I see there's some people talking in the chat as well. So let me have a look at some of these questions. Good to know as well, you can actually vote on other people's questions. So if you don't have a question, have a look at some other people's questions to see what you would like to be answered. So I'm just going to have some water. So the top question here is from Christina. Hi, Christina. I'm conducting an end-of-year survey for my team focused on internal communications and employee engagement. What are some effective questions I can include in the survey to gain valuable insights and identify actionable steps for improvement? Okay, cool. So this is a good question. So in an end-of-year survey, one thing to know before I get to an end-of-year survey, I think there are some real opportunities for smaller insights across the year that gain insight from employees on what they think and feel about internal communications and engagement in the organization. So rather than like leaving it to an end of year thing, I think the end of year thing does have a role, but also think about like the touch points throughout the year and how you can get some of that info, not just from employees, but also what reporting, if possible, you can do that show what channels are performing, where are the adoption rates, that sort of thing, what communications have the highest engagement and why. Taking that to the end of year survey, I would try to get examples from employees of things that really resonated at a lower level, understanding those communications. So like, is there like a specific story that really had an impact and on them throughout the year? Because that's the sort of magic you want to capture and recreate. But also I think like the standard things would be understanding people's admiration or sometimes lack of admiration towards certain channels, what's working, what's not working. But also when you're thinking about that, don't look at that just through an all-up lens. Understand whether are there different role types that are connected with certain channels, because sometimes you can look at the overall picture and think, actually, this channel doesn't work for us, but actually it might work with a subset of your audience. So that's something I would look into. Also, I would say try and get some insight on like more like future thinking types of internal communication. So think about like what are the things that are resonating, like videos, what would they like to see more of, those sorts of things. I actually have a blog as well where we look at the sorts of things you can ask in the survey. So I will follow up after this because I've got a few examples of things from other organizations that might help. So moving on to the second question, which is from Alison, how do you drive employees to Unily in the first place? Employees are very accustomed to being spoon-fed information. Good point. So now that we have a great tool, we need to shift people to proactive use of it. Great question. So I think there are multiple ways. I think you can't always like force people there, but I actually, from Kerzner, one of the things, the Kerzner example earlier, one of the ways they get really great adoption, and I looked across our customer base, and Kerzner have the highest mobile adoption. So when I went there, I asked them, what are the things that actually drive that? So they kind of articulated it through two ways. The first way was through setup and onboarding. So as part of their setup, when HR are getting employees onboarded, whether that's through processes, they have a literal checklist where HR run through what the platform is, the value of the platform, how they use it day to day. They've even got some like day in the life type materials for certain roles that say, hey, you're a lifeguard at they have a water park. Like, what are the touch points that you have with the experience, and how does it add value to you? And so those are the sorts of things that happen day one. And so that's a sort of like top-down way early on that helps people understand why they use the platform, and the fact that it's embedding it early on from the day one. The other way is to kind of like understand some of like the cultural elements. Like, there has to be some good stuff on there that makes people want to come back. And so for Kerzner, again, they said there are like these communities that add value to the business, but actually employees feel part of. So whether they are ERG communities that are well adopted, whether there are certain people that have like communities around ideas and ideation, like make sure there are those things that like entice employees there, have some like new cooler features to like test what works and what doesn't. And I think it's important to not just have like a template start one day and be like, okay, now let's try and get people here. Have those regular touch points to get regular feedback, to see and hear what's working, what's not working. Try different types of experiences. For example, some of our customers have like different types of homepages to test whether option A has better engagement or option B. And so you kind of got like that experimental culture to ensure that the platform is evolving, continues to improve, so that employees want to go there. And yeah, I had a third point, but I can't remember. Yes, this next question here is from Rue, if I can say, I've bet you, I think, but I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name, Rue. How can I define the vision for internal comms? So I would say this comes back to looking like, start with what your organization is aiming for, look at what the current strategy is, look at what the mission, vision, and values are, and understand like what's the role of internal comms in your organization. Have those things on the left-hand side so you understand what the organization is trying to do, how they want to deliver on it, and then understand the ways in which internal comms in your organization can today do some of those things. But if you want it to be forward thinking, have a look at like, in an ideal scenario, what would you want internal comms to be doing? So have like a box being like, this is what we can do today to support the mission, vision, values, but actually here are some other ways we can support it. And so have that as a base activity to start formulating your vision, but also socialize some of it with the business. So you don't want to do it in isolation. Maybe have like, we actually did this recently at Unily. And so what we did is we created 3-4 different versions within key ingredients, we kind of called them. We put the ingredients into the vision. The key ingredients are things like, who are we for? How do we deliver on it? Those sorts of things. And then put it into a vision, have different options, socialize that with key stakeholders to see what they like and don't like about the vision, and then take that feedback away to then come up with like an optimum vision for you. Going on to the next question from Kelsey. We have a manager center on our intranet and we're looking to make some big improvements to it. Do you have any tips or tools in Unily to help increase manager engagement? So the first one I would say is think about the like bottom up content that can be delivered from managers. So it's not just a top down like internal comms manager portal. Think about like Pearson did, spotlighting like the best in class managers, and they did it through, I think, like video tips. So like short video, like a top tip from me over like how I support my team. So that content, so it's not just like a top down thing, but also what they've recently done, which I thought was pretty cool, was have like a monthly, I think they have like a monthly charter as part of that manager portal. So obviously managers are busy, right? There's a lot of comms coming from a lot of different directions. Pearson used the portal as an opportunity to help simplify some of those communications. So what they will do is they will say, okay, if you haven't been able to look at it every day, every week, that's fine, right? Every month we will deliver a pop-up that helps you see what are the key things, what's the must-have from this month, what should you look at, and then what are some nice, cool stories to support that. Because I think managers are under a lot of strain at the moment, both from a comms perspective, from a channels perspective, and also looking at some of the stats from earlier, there's a lot of pressure there. So use it to simplify the experience for them. Understand where are they getting pressure from across the organization, and try and centralize the portal so that it reduces some of that pressure and friction, and that it's seen as the tool to support with manager communications, not something else on top of everything else. I will move on to the next question. So, what tips have you got to help your departmental site page content stand out in a busy Unily ecosystem? So, so departmental wise, I think you have to get like the foundation right first, and understand like what people want from your department there. So before we get onto like the snazzy stuff, because there are loads of cool things you can do, think about how, like, have you got the foundational things right? So do a bit of work to understand, like, in your team, are people messaging you on Teams or Slack for certain information? Are they emailing you for certain things? How can that work be reduced by putting equal access to that stuff on the portal? So get the foundational stuff right. Then I would say, what are the things you want from that departmental portal? Do you want people to better understand a certain policy? Do you want them to contribute more ideas to improve that department? Do you want them to like engage more with that content? Like, think about what you want out of it, and then think about how you can get that. So I've seen some creative ways before to do this. So I've seen like a content calendar, like we're coming up to the end of the year. Some teams have got creative and tried to like basically spotlight certain bits of content across different departments across the year that were like, that got a lot of attention. So actually this is the perfect time of year to do it. Be like, as we get like our Spotify and Apple Music trending or our Wrapped, like it's a good time to spotlight some of the best stories and best things that happened across the year. Great opportunity to do that and do so in a fun way. So that's probably one good idea that I would say. Also, I would say, think about like how your department's portal becomes living and breathing. So that might be through putting a calendar, like a diary or calendar front facing, so people understand what's happening in your department throughout the year. When are your deadlines, so that they can like plan ahead. Those sorts of things that help you surface what's happening in the department, not just like a view of updates. Also, actually, there's another thing that I'll call out here is that there was a session at Unite 24 from Pearson, which was all around design best practices, looking at how you like make it look and feel sexy for an intranet department site. So like what templates you can do, what widgets. So that session is available on demand now on the unily.com website. So definitely have a look at that, because there's some inspo there that you can look at for how to make it look and feel and be exciting. Question here from Steve. Hello, Steve. Most other platforms, e.g. ServiceNow, Workday, are trying to be full digital workplace experiences. Is there best practice for leveraging multiple platforms to ensure the right knowledge is reaching the right audience? So I do have this another on-demand session for you. So at Unite 24, we also had a session on demystifying the digital employee experience. And so we've looked at some of the research from Gartner in terms of how they see the digital employee experience. What are the purposes of certain technology, whether it be Workday, ServiceNow? How do they work well together? And like, what does the overall piece look like? I would say I can't answer that in detail now, but there's a really cool map in that presentation that looks at how, like, maps out the different technologies, how they interweave with each other. So I would say look at that. I will follow up with a link on that, because also what I'd say there is that look at your kind of technology mix at the moment. It's not going to be the same for every organization, because we know that there are certain capabilities, for example, like even within Workday, for example, like Workday is really great at some of the HRIS stuff, and there might be some knowledge on there, but how do you get realistically, for a lot of employees, they're only going to Workday to update certain information, to book holiday. So how can you use your other pieces of technology to drive adoption there? So whether that be having like a small change portal on your intranet to help articulate what are the next moves for Workday, what are the big deadlines, that sort of thing. So it's not a one size fits all, but demystifying the digital employee experience was a session delivered by Matt Boyd at Unite that was really good at doing that. Next, final question from Anna. Hi, Anna. So with the rapid adoption of AI in comms teams, do you see more specialist AI comms roles in comms teams, especially while we are getting used to using AI or more of it? Will it be something that we all do as part of our jobs? I think the answer to that is yes. I think there has been I was at an event last week in Munich with some chief comms officers at big enterprises, and 2 or 3 of those said that they've just hired specific AI comms roles. And I think it shows where we are now. I think it shows that perhaps there are people we as organization haven't understood the full opportunity there, or have maybe looked at it in isolation. And we've actually, Unily has just done some research on this. We haven't released it yet, but when it is live first thing next year, I'll send it out. But basically maybe I shouldn't talk about these findings, but what we start to find from it is how like there is a lot of hype around AI and lots of discussion around it, but how people are using it day to day, both in comms and outside of comms as general employees, is very disjointed, very inconsistent. And so I think AI comms roles are organizations saying, how do we make this more consistent? How do we make sure that we are fully getting the opportunity here? And I think that's plugging a gap at the moment. But I think more sustainably, it won't be, this is our AI comms person. It will actually be interwoven throughout the fabric of all of those roles. But I don't think enterprises have done the right work there yet, or they're still kind of catching their tail on it. So that's why these kind of like roles have come up, in my opinion. And there is one final question here, and I'll wrap up. In case of employees who do not have a PC, i.e. blue collar workers, how can we reach them and attract them? So I think mobile is probably the best opportunity there. I think obviously depending on what industry you're in, whether it might be field workers, it might be manufacturing plant workers, for example, understanding like what channels are they using, also what countries you're in. I know different countries have different rules around these things, but like I would look at mobile as the first opportunity. I think we know employees outside of work use mobile a lot, and it's probably the most common opportunity to have access to, whether that's on company devices or not, but also understanding for your organization, are there other technology touch points? I mentioned signage earlier. So are there opportunities for signage? But also I think there are some Unily customers that understand in shared areas. They might have like shared tablets, for example, and you can create experiences based on a device that maybe don't give you the whole experience, but strip back the experience so that they get access to the critical comms or the critical knowledge articles or the critical policy updates. And so I would say look at those digital channels, but of course there are analog channels as well. I've seen a bit of a comeback of the kind of employee magazine. So that's one channel, and I know there are different views on that, but understanding for the countries you're operating in, for where your employees are, what channels do they like, what don't they like, how are they successful? But also you can't leave it just to chance. Be intentional about designing that employee experience for them, how you expect them to engage, when you expect them to engage, because there are very limited times in the day that blue-collar workers can consume communications. Map out on a timeline, when do you want them to consume what? Is it first thing in the morning? Is it just before or after their lunch? Is it on their commute? Understand that, because then you can have a think about what channels do we want to recommend them to use when and where. Cool. I think my voice is running out. But lots of questions there, and I thank you for all of them. We've got more on this webinar series. Oh, we've also got some cool resources. So I've mentioned some of these throughout, but we had a really cool panel webinar on the EX Super Team at Unite. You can scan that QR code and it will take you to watch that on demand. So that's one thing you can follow up with. Also, if you want to hear about Unilever's vision for employee experience, I mentioned organizational velocity, understanding about how internal comms support that. You can scan that QR code and hear Unilever's vision for the future of EX. And also, I think it's already been shared in the chat now, but there's the Kerzner case study. There's the video, but also you can download the whole guide. There's a guide that looks into the real detail around how they got some of those things going. So there's the cool, shiny video, and I'm a video person, so I watched that. But there is a really detailed guide to how they got that as well. And moving on to part 2. So you'll be back with me on Thursday, and we'll be looking at that part on embracing the ultra diverse workforce. So I mentioned employee personas a little bit, mapping out the workday of an employee. I will be talking to you about how we can do that for enterprises where we've got such a diverse types of employees, diverse types of roles, having a think about that. So join me on Thursday. If you can't make it, don't worry. You'll be able to have all of the download. You'll be able to have all of the different sessions on demand. And part 3 will be next week, Tuesday, and you'll be with my colleague, Ashlyn, who will be talking about the flow of work, talking about some of the questions that came up on how the technologies work together, how do we optimize for the flow of work. That's what that session's about. And that's all we've got time for. So please leave us feedback. It's the first time we've done this series online. So please tell me what was good, what wasn't good, what was great. Just kidding. But yeah, any feedback is great. So unit.com/feedback, but also once this webinar ends, you'll go to a screen with the feedback form on to download some guides and also give feedback. So that's what we've got time for. And thank you for joining me for this session. I will see you on Thursday, hopefully.